Welcome to Uncaged. Today we're speaking with a dear friend, Erin Flaxman. Erin Flaxman is kind of a growth officer extraordinaire in the advertising and marketing space. She's played a big role in building some of the most successful agency brands. And before that, she worked on the brand side, on the client side as well. We're excited to have Erin here. We're going to be talking a lot about something that's first and foremost in a lot of leaders' minds these days, which is growth, growth, growth. How do we get growth? Where are we going to find it in 2024? What's the plan? But before we get there, Erin, tell us a little bit about you and your background.
So I am actually a lifer in the industry. I've been in media agency world since the 90s, so a while. I started out as a strategist and planner, and then I switched to biz dev about 15 years ago when I moved to the US, actually. I'm Canadian, but I'm also American now. I became an American last
Woohoo!
year. Yeah. 1 year anniversary is coming up in February. So yeah. So I'm a dual citizen. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so I've been in new business, growth, marketing, comms, that whole space for marketing services firms and agencies since 2007.
Mhm.
So it's been a while. And, I met you, I think, in my first role, actually, new business was at IPG in the US specifically. And then I moved into global. So the last probably, I'd say, 8 or 9 years, I've been specifically global. But the US is the biggest market, so it's always the biggest focus for us as well.
So,
And yeah,
Erin, I mean, it's such a fascinating space that you're in. And I think just to kind of give a little bit of color to the whole world, you hear about when a big brand shifts their agency, what probably people don't know is the process that those agencies and brands go through, or perhaps maybe I should say the dance that they do, which includes so many levels now, where basically Erin and her team, my experiences were that she would get a massive book dropped on her desk filled with questions from, what work the company had done to very granular data, financial utilization questions. And I would say that process has only gotten more granular, more data focused going forward. But I mean, Erin, when you look out right now in the landscape, what are you seeing out there? What's top of mind for agencies in the growth space?
well, I think, it's become, they call it pitch-a-palooza every year now, because every year there's about 1 million pitches, all shapes and sizes. And I think for agencies, the biggest challenge right now is deciding which ones they should participate in, because they could be participating in 20 at a time, probably sometimes. And so there's that issue.
Yeah.
Resourcing it is a big challenge for agencies, and really understanding how they're differentiating themselves, because I think that's also a real challenge. I mean, a lot of the agencies have their own unique story to tell, but they're not that different. At the end of the day, they're, media agency that executes on behalf of clients and spends their money for them as wisely as possible. And so I think that's where it gets really challenging, is how do you innovate and bring in, bring in new things into the service that you provide that actually
Yeah.
make you different.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that when we were working together, a lot of it was, how digital are you? What are you doing in the digital space? Do you have sophisticated digital offerings? Nowadays, people are talking about things like AI. I mean, how do those new topics play in?
Well, I think that's part of the challenge too, is that bringing in these new topics means you need to bring in the resources and the talent that can actually talk about it and
Yeah.
understands it, right? So keeping up with the pace of change is the biggest challenge, always. And also, there's a lot of hot topics around sustainability, DEI. And so, being able to make sure that you have the right talent, not only in the room for the pitch, but like at your agency that can actually bring, like, elevate that within the organization is a real challenge, I think.
It's so funny because when I think back on my agency days, and folks that don't know, I'm a gym rat or an ad rat, spent a long time in the agency world. And I remember so fondly, and as well as kind of so in an exhausted fashion too, the whole pitch process, because in some ways it was the most exciting thing, right? You were forced to come up with concepts and ideas and new commercial structures quickly that essentially could start to define an industry. But at the same time, like, there was so much work, so much detail on top of just like the normal day-to-day stuff that had to get done, and super challenging. I mean, how are agency groups finding it now? Has that procurement revolution kind of reshaped the landscape?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the direct pitches are more frequent now than they were in the past. The consultants still manage a lot of them, obviously, but you do have a lot more of a direct relationship with procurement, which then, of course, changes the type of conversation that you're having, right? Because procurement has a very different mandate than, say, marketing services within the organization or the CMO does. So that's interesting. I think also, you talk about the book that they used to drop on your table. They still do that. I think the biggest challenge for agencies is trying to get information out of the client rather than it being only a one-way conversation.
Yeah.
So you're getting asked to do all of this work, provide all of this data, but you're not getting very much information out of them about what their business challenges are, what they're dealing with. So it's difficult to reply to all this, content that they want you to give them without that knowledge in the background.
How is that kind of balance, that delicate balance of sometimes like consolidation versus really excellence going for groups? I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, you have a brand and they'll kind of want a marketing services support group, but at the same time, like, they kind of are always asking for it to be customized with this or that. Are we still in that kind of massive customization phase?
I would say so, with a lot of the larger ones, especially.
Yeah.
There's branded units within a lot of the agencies for specific clients, so it's a separate operation really to manage a specific client. And I think that hasn't changed. I don't think that's a new thing. I don't
Yeah.
think it's more than it was before, but I think it's still, but it is, to your point, it's kind of like a tug to go in both directions, because you want your agency brand to stand for something, but yet you have to customize it to manage a specific brand's operations. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's interesting. At this point, I sometimes wonder, some of these clients, they have so much information at this point. You're kind of like, don't you know everything already? Don't you kind of know how we like, you're asking for the same book again 3 years later? Really? Like, come on. There's got
Yeah.
to be a better
Well, that's
way.
the thing too, right? When you're talking about the clients that go into, they're in a cycle. So
Yeah.
every 3 years, I can think of one in particular, which we both have pitched a couple times, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Every 3 years, they march around the world and have their agencies go through a review process, and they bring in new, competitors to help. That is interesting, right? It's like,
Yeah.
what, maybe, and I think that's always been my biggest, not to sound negative, but my biggest pet peeve is, why are you not asking us questions about challenge? Like, give us a challenge and have
Yeah.
us solve it rather than asking for facts and figures about. I mean, if we're one of the top holding company brands,
Yeah.
we're probably legit. Like, we probably have all of the things that you need, right? In terms of numbers of people and services that you need, all of that. Like, you probably don't need to ask us those types of questions, or at least
Yeah.
simplify it a bit more,
Yeah,
and have us
exactly.
focus on something that's like really going to help you with your business versus, whether or not we have an analytics team and how many people are on it,
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm spot on. Really, really good point. But I mean, Erin, what an interesting space, and certainly never a dull moment in this. And certainly for someone to have operated and to succeeded in this space like you have to have passion for this. So, I mean, what really drives you for this area?
I just think media is fascinating, really. I mean, it's funny because it's like people who work in the agency space, I think we're all kind of cut from a similar cloth. Like we love the frenetic chaos. Sometimes
Hmm.
it's like you said, like it's, it's really exciting, but it's exhausting. But I don't know, there's something about that. And I think with media, it's always changing.
Yeah.
So I worked for Home Depot for a few years and I was in a role where nothing was really changing and I couldn't do it. I was like, I need a faster pace. I need to be learning all the time. I
Hmm.
need to be trying to figure these things out. And I think that's something that I've been spending a lot of time on lately.
Hmm.
Um, Now that I'm consulting, I've been really able to read more and
Hmm.
just stay on top of like all the changes. And I mean, it's, like how many times are we going to talk about the cookie going away and then it's coming back? And, like it's, you can't keep up with it. It's like there's constantly something happening. And I think that's why I like it. I also really
Yeah.
like the industry. I love working with different types of people,
Yeah.
And so you have like these creative, visionary types of people who are the more, the strategic ones. And then you have the analytics. And so you're always dealing with people who think in a different way, which I think is also fascinating. Um, and I love the exposure to like different cultures. And I mean, that's why I've always really loved the global space because I really love, every pitch involves a different country that you may not have
Yeah.
worked with before. And I think that's really fun.
Well, I mean, I just remember so many situations where, Erin, where you got all of us to, I felt like you were playing kind of, almost like an operations lead role for handling like the commercial structure for the thing. And then pulling all of us, heavy ego people together in a room to actually like support one another
Yeah.
when,
Totally.
you may have a side business as a psychologist, you just don't know it, but
My God, we used to joke, Tiffany and I used to joke that we should put doctors in on the top of the door during a pitch because at any given moment, somebody was having a breakdown and needed to, talk it out. Oh God, yeah. Totally.
yeah. Well, Erin, I mean, amazing to talk about all this stuff. Here we are, though, 2024. I know that you've been doing a pretty cool thing at Columbia right now, but tell me a little bit what's on the docket for this year for really kind of the growth space. Do you think agencies are going to be aggressively going after stuff? Is there kind of big bogeys on everyone's head these days?
I feel like there always is. I mean, I don't think that's another thing that doesn't change. I think we finally have dug our way out of the pandemic. And so everyone's just back to business, and there's no more excuses. So, we're 3 years later, well, it's 4 years, I guess now.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. So I do think I am not as close to like which big bogeys are out there at the moment because I'm
Yeah.
not, working in a big agency right now, but there's always something, always.
There's always something.
And the
Always.
hard part is predicting what it's going to be, right? Because people keep that very, very, very close to the vest until
Yeah.
they announce it. And so it's always interesting. There's always, especially this time of year, they're coming.
I just
And
think back on, working and supporting, the efforts that you were driving. And a lot of those ways that you would manage the process, I still use to this day, in
aw,
terms
that
of
makes you
like,
feel good.
yeah, I mean, I think people probably underestimate the complexity of what has to get done over a very, very short period of time and how you manage that kind of nonlinear process to somehow come together as a linear show.
Mhm.
And it's quite amazing. And certainly those are, I think, life skills. So I definitely thank you for that. Erin, if someone wanted to learn more about what you're up to and get in touch, where's the best place to find you?
Well, I am very regular on LinkedIn right now, so you can always find me there. And I
Cool.
have a website, flaxman.co, so you can contact me there as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, Flaxman.co. Well, Erin, thank you so much for coming on the Uncaged show. We've been speaking with Erin Flaxman. We've been talking to her about the world of growth, agency growth, marketing growth, how that whole process works, what's top of mind. It's a very dynamic space and sounds like it's going to continue to be so, certainly for the near future. Erin, again, thank you so much, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you. Great to see you again.